The courtroom was packed, the air tense with years of unresolved bitterness. At the center of it all was the sprawling family estate, land, wealth, and history tied together in bricks and soil. Brothers and sisters, once united by love, now stood across from each other like enemies. Their voices no longer carried warmth, only accusations. What was supposed to be their shared inheritance had turned into a battlefield. From the moment the case began, every detail felt like it carried the weight of generations. Old letters, financial documents, even whispers of hidden secrets, all were brought forward to tip the scales of justice. The judge, silent but watchful, knew this was no ordinary property dispute. This was about trust, betrayal, and a legacy that could either bind the family forever or tear it apart beyond repair. One side painted themselves as the victims, cheated out of what was rightfully theirs. The other side portrayed themselves as protectors of the estate, guardians who had sacrificed to maintain what their parents built. Every testimony brought gasps. Every document brought new suspicion. The truth was tangled, and untangling it seemed impossible. But beneath the arguments and legal jargon was something deeper. The pain of family turning against family. The tears on a sister's face as she recounted how her brother cut her out of decisions. The fury in a nephew's voice as he claimed lies had been told for years. Each word felt like a dagger, each revelation another scar. And yet, as heavy as the air was, the judge hinted that not everything had been revealed. There were documents no one expected, witnesses who hadn't yet spoken, and a truth that could rewrite everything the family thought they knew. What lay ahead was not just a verdict about land or money, it was a verdict about trust, loyalty, and truth itself. If you're just joining us, welcome to our channel where we uncover powerful, dramatic stories that remind us of the human heart behind every headline. Make sure you subscribe, because what you're about to hear will take you through betrayal, resilience, and an ending that no one in that courtroom could have seen coming. As the first week of the trial closed, the tension only grew stronger. The judge ordered everyone to prepare for what was next, the introduction of sealed letters written by the family's patriarch before his death. The whispers in the room spread like fire. Could these letters hold the key? Could they decide who truly deserved the estate? The siblings exchanged nervous glances, each wondering if their darkest secrets were about to come to light. The estate wasn't just bricks and land anymore, it was the stage for a shocking revelation, one that would change their family forever. And as the judge called for the next day's session, the family braced themselves for truths they weren't ready to hear. The next morning, the courtroom was silent, as though everyone could feel the weight of what was about to unfold. The judge entered, his expression unreadable, and then the clerk carried forward a small, weathered box. Inside it were the letters, the final words of the family patriarch, sealed years ago, never before seen by anyone outside the court. As the first letter was read aloud, the tension was unbearable. In careful handwriting, the father spoke not of money, not of land, but of unity. He reminded his children that the estate was meant to bring them together, not tear them apart. Yet, as noble as his words sounded, they were followed by something no one expected. He had left specific instructions about who was to control the estate and why. Gasps echoed through the room. The eldest son, long believed to be the rightful heir, was not the one chosen. Instead, the father entrusted the estate to the youngest daughter, a quiet figure who had been mostly silent during the trial. Shock spread across the family. The daughter herself sat frozen, her hands trembling, as if the weight of the entire legacy had just been placed on her shoulders. The brothers erupted, their lawyers demanding the letter be dismissed, arguing it had no legal authority. But the judge reminded them that intent matters, and in estate battles, intent can reshape everything. Suddenly, the case was no longer about documents and financial records. It was about whether the father's final words would be honored. The daughter finally spoke. Her voice shook but carried strength. She revealed how she had quietly cared for their father in his final years, when others had been absent. She spoke of long nights at his bedside, of sacrifices she made without recognition. Her words weren't filled with anger, but with quiet truth, and for the first time, the courtroom saw a side of her story that no one had acknowledged. The brothers, however, weren't ready to surrender. They accused her of manipulating their father, of whispering lies into his ear to gain control of everything. The room grew louder, emotions boiling over, as accusations filled the air. The judge had to strike the gavel several times just to restore order. But even amid the chaos, one thing was clear. The letters had changed everything. They were no longer fighting over what the will said, but over what the father truly wanted. And in that battle, the family's darkest secrets were starting to rise to the surface. As the day ended, the judge made a stunning announcement. Another letter remained unopened, one that had been sealed with a warning. The father had written it only to be read if the family turned against each other in court. The entire room went still. The second letter could decide everything: inheritance, trust, and legacy. And as the clerk prepared to break the seal the following morning, no one in that courtroom could predict the storm it would unleash. The next morning, the courtroom filled faster than ever before. Journalists crowded the back rows, cameras flashed outside the courthouse, and whispers carried through the air. Everyone wanted to know what was in that sealed letter. What final truth had the father hidden until the family was at its breaking point? The clerk opened the envelope slowly, carefully, as though the paper itself carried a fragile kind of power. The judge adjusted his glasses and began to read. The father's words cut through the silence with a chilling clarity. He wrote that he feared this very moment, that his children would turn against each other like vultures over his estate. And then came the line that made the entire room gasp. If my family cannot resolve this with unity, then they do not deserve to inherit my legacy. The courtroom exploded with noise. Lawyers shouted objections, siblings whispered angrily to one another, and the judge pounded his gavel to restore silence. The letter went further, stating that if his children fought over the estate in court, the entire fortune would instead be donated to charity. Every house, every piece of land, every dollar, gone from the family name. The youngest daughter's face went pale. She realized her father's trust in her was more than inheritance. It was a test of character. The eldest son looked furious, his dreams of wealth slipping away with every word of that letter. The middle brother clenched his fists, torn between pride and panic. For the first time, it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about loyalty, respect, and whether they had honored the man who built everything they now wanted to control. The letter had cornered them. Either come together as a family or lose it all. The judge set down the paper and looked at each of them. This court must now determine, he said, whether these letters reflect the true and binding intent of the deceased. That decision could destroy generations of inheritance or force reconciliation none of them had wanted. The brothers quickly scrambled to protect their claims. Their lawyers insisted that the father had been manipulated, that the letters were unreliable, perhaps even forged. They demanded forensic tests, handwriting analysis, anything to discredit what had just been read. But the daughter remained calm. She said only one sentence, quietly but firmly. "You know, he meant every word." It struck the room like thunder. Her simplicity made their protests sound desperate, hollow, even childish. Still, the judge allowed an investigation into the letters, knowing the verdict could not rest on emotion alone. Experts were brought in, the handwriting verified, the paper dated, and when the results came back, they confirmed what many already suspected. The letters were genuine. By then, the siblings had turned on one another completely. The courtroom was no longer just a place of law, but a battlefield of betrayal, anger, and regret. They were fighting not only for land and money, but for pride, for old wounds that had never healed. And just when it seemed the daughter might prevail, a new witness was called forward, someone who had once been inside the family estate, someone who claimed to have overheard the father's last conversations. As the witness walked to the stand, every eye in the room, the witness who stepped forward was the family's longtime caretaker, a man who had served in the estate for over 30 years. His presence brought instant tension. He had seen everything, from the siblings' childhood squabbles to their father's final days. Now, with the entire courtroom holding its breath, he spoke. He revealed that in the weeks before his death, the father had expressed deep regret, not about his wealth, but about the division it had already created among his children. The caretaker testified that the father specifically said he wanted his legacy to be preserved only by the child who truly understood responsibility, humility, and family unity. The father had worried that greed would destroy the estate, and now, looking around the courtroom, it was clear those fears had come true. The eldest son's lawyer objected furiously, claiming hearsay, but the judge allowed the testimony. The caretaker continued. The father had entrusted him with a private journal, which contained further instructions. Gasps echoed once more as the journal was produced. Page after page revealed the father's anguish over the selfishness he saw growing in his family. His words were cutting. "I would rather my estate burn to the ground than feed the greed of ungrateful heirs." Silence blanketed the courtroom. The eldest son slumped back in his chair, his face pale with defeat. The middle brother's anger turned into despair, and the youngest daughter, tears streaming down her face, seemed both heartbroken and vindicated. The judge delivered his decision. The estate would not be divided among the siblings who had treated their father's legacy as spoils of war. Instead, following the father's own letters and journal, the majority of the inheritance would go to charity, schools, hospitals, and community programs that would serve people in need. The daughter would receive only a small portion, not as a reward, but as recognition of the trust her father placed in her. The verdict was devastating for the brothers. Their greed had cost them everything. They had fought for mansions, for wealth, for control, and in the end, they walked away with nothing but shame. The daughter, though not enriched with fortune, carried something far more valuable: the knowledge that she had honored her father's wishes. She understood, perhaps better than anyone else, that legacy is not about what you keep, but about what you give. The case became a lesson, far beyond that family's tragedy. It was covered by newspapers around the world, sparking conversations about greed, inheritance, and the true meaning of family. For some, it was just another courtroom drama, but for others, it was a powerful reminder. Wealth without love is nothing, and family torn by greed is no family at all. And so, the battle for the family estate ended, not with riches or victory, but with a haunting message left behind by a father who tried to teach his children one last lesson. A lesson